I'm ready. Hi. Hi. Welcome to the 432 Hertz live stream. Thank you for joining me. And we have some amazing music for you guys tonight. Be sure to click below for the details on how to donate to the Loveland Foundation and the Green Line Initiative, benefiting people of color, offering mental health resources, and building generational wealth. My name is Ivy Roots, and this is Appreciate. You can play the track now. Rolling down the highway, I just do it my way, running to excuse, learning to appreciate truth. I just keep on running from the clues. So tell me where you're coming by, when you know we don't see eye to eye. They never gonna appreciate you. Running to excuse, 'cause they never, never. Running to excuse, they never, never. Running. First, I'm learning to appreciate you. Da 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 da. That was Appreciate. So, you know, I wrote that song about appreciating your truth, appreciating where you are at all times, appreciating the moment, appreciating the present, and sitting in that. Even if it's not good at the moment, getting comfortable with your uncomfortable. So that's what that song's about. This next song is called Friend. I hope you like it. Hit it. Against the wall, you know who to call on. When you ain't got nobody else, you know who your help comes through. You'll never know another woman so fine. You will never meet another woman so fly. I'm hoping that you know when that is chosen, 'cause it's spoken to life. Keep on moving with the dreams that you're pursuing and try to be kind, no matter what anybody says. 'Cause I'll be here until the very end. No, friend in me. You know you got a friend. Yeah, you got a friend in me. And you got a friend. You're getting from your friends, baby. Do you know you're a star? They don't know who you are, baby. 'Cause anybody else might mistake you out. So you gotta believe you're more than what meets the eye. And you better believe you're worthy. Protect your life. Hoping that you know that you're chosen, 'cause it's spoken to life. Bound to keep on moving with the dreams that you're pursuing and try to be kind. Yeah, no matter what anybody says, 'cause I'll be here until the very end. No, friend in me. You know you got a friend. Yeah, you got a friend in me. And you, yeah. Ooh. Friend. Yeah, you got a friend in me. You got a friend. Ooh. So that song was titled Friend. Pretty self-explanatory. This next song is Often. Wanna know if you feel the very same way I do. Oh, and if I gotta say it for myself, I won't hide the way I feel inside. These kind of things don't come around often, and often. These kind of things don't come around often, and often's not enough. Better known as possibly the missing piece to my soul. To press rewind and listen as the story's told. Just hold on. You wanna know if I feel the very same way you do. Oh, and if I gotta say it for myself, I won't hide the way I feel inside. These kind of things don't come around often, and often. And these kind of things don't come around often, and often's not enough. These kind of things don't come around often, and often. And these kind of things don't come around often, and often's not enough. Ooh. Ooh. Yeah, 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 yeah. And often's not enough. Thank you. This last song is entitled Home. What a beautiful way to fall in a deep, deep slumber in a daydream with you. And I can see the possibilities when I am free to choose. So pull me away to the unknown in search of a place to call home. Pull me away to the unknown in search of a place to call home. Guess I wanted that. Guess I needed that. 'Cause you never had it your way. I've been going and zoning, flowing like, yeah. Every time I phone home, you're there. Like you ain't gotta go nowhere. I send it on you all my life. I tend to bet it on my life. Patience never comes, you're fine. You're divine, and who am I to say, don't you walk away from me? I'll be right here where you set me free, in search of a place to call my own. So pull me away to the unknown in search of a place to call home. You pull me away to the unknown in search of a place to call home. Guess I wanted that. I needed that. Guess I wanted that. Ooh, guess I needed that. Sing it with me now if you're at home. I guess I needed that. Guess I wanted that. Ooh, guess I wanted that. I guess I needed that. Fade it out like Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Please stick around because we have more amazing acts. We have Mike Molina. We have Azura Vibes in the building. But before we get to them, we have this bomb interview that we did with John Stewart Reed, who is an acoustics engineer. So check it out. English acoustics pioneer John Stewart Reed is a man on a mission to educate and inspire the world in the field of cymatics, the study of visible sound. His CymaScope invention has changed our perception of sound forever. Seeing sound allows us to understand the omnipresent aspect of our world and universe fuller and deeper. John's cymatics research is helping to elevate this important new field in the scientific arena, including a study on how dolphins see with sound, published in the Journal of Marine Biology. His 2 recent studies are focused on the effects of music and the longevity of red blood cells, with a preliminary report published by Experiment.com and on differentiating between sounds emitted by healthy cells and cancer cells, a scientific paper published in the Water Journal. John speaks extensively on his research findings to audiences through the United States, United Kingdoms, and Europe. I'm excited to present this interview, and I hope you enjoy it. What is the difference between music medicine and music therapy?
Well, music medicine is quite a new term, actually, Lauren, in medicine. It's an exciting new term, but let's start with music therapy, because music therapy has actually been around a long time. I would say that in the 40s, 1940s and 50s, it really started to take a hold. And essentially what music therapy is working with music that a patient, you know, in a hospital setting or a clinical setting at any rate, that a patient loves. In other words, it's music that a person particularly loves to hear or to listen to. And always in the presence of a therapist. So you have to have a person there who's studied music therapy. I believe it's a 4-year course now. But anyway, so it's a clinical discipline in which the patient is receiving music that he or she has particularly said, you know, that they love to hear or be immersed in, and always with a therapist. Okay, so in other words, there's an interview going on between the therapist and the patient, so that the therapist can better understand how the patient is feeling. So that is kind of a definition of music therapy and a music therapist situation. But music medicine is significantly different in the sense that we're still dealing with music, but now there does not need to be a therapist present during the session. So the patient can be immersed in music, whether via headphones or full body immersion in a musical setting. And what's of interest to the medics in this instance are the physiological parameters. What's actually going on in the body of that person in terms of the physiological markers and so on. So in other words, there doesn't need to be a clinician present, you know, while that electronic equipment is measuring the performance of that person, the markers of that person. So it's significantly different, because obviously music medicine is dealing with physiological effects of musical frequencies on biological material. Whereas music therapy really is dealing with the psychological aspects mainly. Of course, there's a knock-on effect always on the physiology from the psychological effects, but still, it's primarily, the music therapy is primarily focused on the psychological effects rather than the physiological effects.
Wow. Well, thank you for that separation of music medicine and music therapy. How are pop and hip hop the most effective in bringing blood cells to life? Because I thought this was interesting.
Well, it is interesting, isn't it? It's actually very exciting because, you know, if you ask most people what would be the effects of playing classical music to a plant or to a person, you know, versus hip hop or rock or whatever, you know, some kind of pop music. And of course, most people, probably because we've all been conditioned over the years to to thinking that classical music is always better, you know, than some form of pop music. But in this instance, it truly is not. And how this all came about was because we did a series of experiments. I say we, I'm talking about Professor Sung-Chol Ji of Rutgers University, and our lab here in the UK. We did a series of experiments with human blood. And what we did was simply take a test tube of human blood and then decant that into two smaller test tubes. The blood was warmed up to normal blood temperature, you know, 98.6, 37 degrees C, in an incubator. So first of all, we put one of the vials in a very, very quiet environment, which we have in the lab here. It's called a Faraday cage. So it's electromagnetically screened, but it's also acoustically lined. So it's very, very quiet in there, quieter than the quietest bedroom, basically. And so that's the control vial. So it's in an incubator at normal blood temperature and for a period of 20 minutes in silence, essentially. Then the other vial we put into another incubator, but this time there's a little loudspeaker in that incubator, and that's in the main body of the lab here, right beside me, actually. And so what we're doing there is we are immersing that blood in music for the same period of time, 20 minutes, right? And then after that period of time, we are testing the numbers of red blood cells that are living in each of the two test tubes. And we do that with an automatic cell counter. So we don't literally have to count them ourselves. There are too many anyway. There are millions and millions of blood cells. So
That's cool.
It's all done automatically. And the results were just extraordinary. I mean, we did think there would be some kind of a result, you know, but this was all hypothetical in the first place. Of course, no one had ever done this before. But we could never have predicted, Lauren, you know, the actual result. And so what we found was, in every case, every kind of music, every genre of music, including classical, there was a significant number, a higher number of red blood cells living in the musical environment than there were in the quiet environment. But the most surprising result was, whenever we used music that had a good solid bass beat, the numbers of red blood cells living increased markedly, you know, when measured through the automatic cell counter. So now we were dealing with a strange phenomenon that we just hadn't predicted. But the upshot of it is, you know, I'll keep this very short because, you know, it's quite a technical subject, but I'll give you a very, very brief view of why we think this is happening, still yet to be proven. But what happens is, if we come back to the situation where, let's talk about the human heart. What does a human heart does? Well, we know that it pumps blood around the body. It's a pump, right? So it's dealing with circulation. And circulation, of course, is vital, that we get this blood everywhere in our body. But what is it really, why is this blood necessary in different parts of our body? Well, it's because the blood is taking oxygen. That's the primary reason why we are conscious, is because the blood is taking oxygen to the different parts of our body. And particularly important to get that oxygen to our brains, because if we don't have oxygen in our brains, if it drops below a certain level, within a few seconds, we literally lose consciousness. So if your heart stops, that pump stops, you will black out literally within seconds, okay, and lose consciousness. So that's happening because your brain is being starved of oxygen. You know, your body can be starved of oxygen for quite a long time, actually, but not your brain. Your brain needs it all the time, right? So why is this, how is this related to music and this experiment? Well, it's related because the bass beats in the music actually operate in a similar mechanical fashion to a human heart. So the human heart is providing a pressure pulse, a beat. We call it a heartbeat, don't we? It's actually a pressure pulse in the blood itself. So this is low frequency pressure. And what that's doing, apart from circulating the blood, obviously, the other thing that it's doing is it's allowing the hemoglobin molecules that are in the red blood cells to uptake the oxygen. The oxygen is already dissolved in the blood. It's happening all the time. Just every time you take a breath, you know, you're super oxygenating your blood with obviously oxygen molecules that cannot be absorbed by the hemoglobin molecules until there's a pressure pulse. Okay, so imagine you've got all these hemoglobin molecules surrounded by oxygen molecules, but they can't access it. They can only access that oxygen when there's a pressure pulse, which comes from your heart. But now, enter music. When music comes into your body, particularly in the form of low frequencies, you know, from good solid bass beats, that acts in a similar way to the human heart and allows the hemoglobin molecules to uptake more oxygen. And it's this very mechanism that we are hypothesizing is the reason why we have so many more red blood cells living in the musical environment than we do, you know, in the quiet environment. Because what happens basically, Lauren, is if you take a test tube of blood, it will always contain millions and millions of healthy red blood cells that are alive and kicking. There will be millions that are already dead, but there will also be more millions that are in a kind of transitory stage between living and dying. In other words, they're old red blood cells. They're starting to lose their outer cell integrity, so they're starting to die. This is a normal, natural process.
Yeah.
But what happens when the music comes along, right, and this extra oxygen, it helps to repair the outer membranes of these old red blood cells and gives them new life. And so the cell counter,
that is amazing.
Actually, it is. I mean, the cell counter counts them as now they're living, whereas they would have been counted as dead before, even though they're not strictly dead. The cell counter would actually count them as dead. And so it is an exciting piece of research.
That's interesting. Wow. So then bass, I guess music with lots of bass, heavy bass and heavy drums, I think you mentioned in your research, are really influential in creating that effect to help heal the body.
And drumming as well. Don't forget drumming, you know, because drumming has been used for centuries, actually millennia, you know, tribes all over the world, you know, indigenous tribes have used drumming, and drumming is just as beneficial as the bass beats that I'm talking about that come from, you know, bass guitars or whatever. So yeah, I mean, it is a fantastic piece of research, but don't forget also that this mechanism that we're hypothesizing here regarding oxygen being effectively made available because of the bass beats, that oxygen isn't only helping to give us a higher red blood cell count, right? Oxygen is a key healing molecule in the body. So it doesn't, you know, it will help to repair all sorts of tissue all over the body. So it's absolutely essential for healing. And that's why it's so exciting, because we could have here come across a mechanism that in the future means that patients in hospitals can be supported not only by you know, medicines, but also by music medicine, right? It is very exciting indeed.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for that answer. That was great. Okay, let's get to the next one. Okay, I have to take a breath for a second. Wow, because going through and looking, I'm trying to stick to the script, but like looking at all of your research is amazing to me. All the different ways that you can heal the body through intention, like when you talk about the infrared rays going to the universe, and how there's a possibility for that to be connected. Like, I would love to know more about that too. So could we talk more about electromagnetism and sound?
Yes, this is another fascinating area because, you know, most people just think of sound in a kind of very everyday sense. They don't realize that actually sound has almost magical properties. So the first thing to say is that when you create sound, let's say, with your voice, now I'm speaking, most people, if you ask them, what is the shape of sound coming out of your mouth? They will say, well, it's a wave. Everyone knows that sound is a wave, right? Because this is what we're taught at schools, colleges, university, sound is a wave. But that's not actually true. Not in the strict sense, because, if you say to someone, what is the shape of sound? And they say it's a wave. And then you say, okay, well, show me the shape of sound coming out of your mouth now. And they will do this, right? They'll do a wiggle in the air.
Yeah.
And it's just not
That's
true.
how you learn.
Physics doesn't work like that. Nature does not work like that. Yeah, so basically, nature does not use graphs. That's a graph, right? That's a graph. Nature doesn't use graphs. So what nature does is, in the case of audible sound, propagates sound as a very beautiful bubble, and on the surface of that bubble is a beautiful pattern which represents my unique voice, just as you have your own unique bubble pattern, Lauren. We all have our own unique pattern on the surface of the bubble. So if we could see sound, we would be living in a kaleidoscopic, melee of beautiful bubbles.
It's just the constant expansion of energy then. Because you mentioned the same thing about light applies to light.
Yeah, light also, all natural light propagates in the same way, spherically, basically, right? So not as a wave. We talk about light waves, but again, they don't exist, Again, if you look at a light wave in a book, it'll always be shown as a wiggle, but that's not true, right? It's only because
that's how I learned, yeah.
It's very difficult. Yeah. It's very difficult to portray it, on a page in any other way. But anyway, so coming back to the magical properties of sound, when we make sound, as I say, it propagates from our mouth as a bubble, expanding at the speed of sound, naturally, whatever that happens to be, depending on, how high you are above sea level. But nevertheless, the other thing that happens is that sound is, of course, collisions between molecules. In this case, we're talking about in air on planet Earth. So all the molecules are involved in passing on the unique vibration, say, in this case of your voice, like a kind of domino, but in a three-dimensional spherical domino effect, where every molecule is bumping into its neighbors and passing on all of the vibrations, right? But every time there's a collision between two molecules, doesn't matter what the gas is, but just any two molecules, one molecule is vibrating with all your uniqueness of your voice, and it bumps into its neighbor, it too starts to vibrate in exactly the same way. But something else happens that is almost like magic, because when two molecules collide, in physics, it's called an inelastic collision. And when you have an inelastic collision, it means some energy is being lost. We term this in everyday language friction, right? You know what happens if you rub your hands together very vigorously, you feel warmth. Well, what you're doing really is the molecules in one hand are slipping past the molecules in your other hand, and around every molecule is a magnetic shell. And when these magnetic shells bump against each other or rub or slip past each other, they have to launch electromagnetism. In other words, energy is being exchanged. So the frictional forces are causing energy to be launched. And this energy is actually light, right? So with sound, every time you make a sound, you're not only creating a sound bubble, you're also creating an infrared bubble. And the beauty of this is that the infrared bubble is carrying all the same modulations of your voice. In this case, we're talking about voice.
Wow.
So in other words, the infrared, if we're talking about it, from a graphic point of view, the infrared is modulated in amplitude by your voice frequencies, right? So what this means, literally, Lauren, if you go outside and you walk up onto a hill somewhere, or you're on the top of a building, and you sing to the sky, you sing to the stars, it literally means that your voice energy will be going into space, not in the form of sound, of course, because sound, well, it'll diminish after about a mile or something. It just goes into noise after about a mile.
Yeah.
But the infrared component of your voice will go into space, and it will keep on going forever. It will never, ever stop. So if you sing to the stars, literally your song or your music will go to the stars. And it's a poetic thing, also true. It's also true from a scientific perspective. And some people have said to me when I'm giving lectures, well, if you can literally sing to the stars, shouldn't the stars be singing to us as well? And actually they are. So this is the science of astroseismology. And what's happening these days is that an astroseismologist can listen in to the song of the star simply by using a powerful telescope to collect some of the light of the star. And then the light goes into a photodiode, which converts the light into electrical impulses, and contained within those impulses are literally the sounds that are happening in the interior of the star. So this is the kind of reverse process to the one that I've just described, where your song will go to the stars, but the stars are also singing to us all the time. You can't hear them, of course. Probably a good thing that you can't. But anyway,
That's awesome. That's just awesome.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Wow.
I release my shame. I release my shame. I release my shame. I release my shame.
Mike Malone.
Look, hey, hope y'all doing good. Yo.
I know that I got a problem.
life is crazy, my God. Come right the days when you're wrong and lazy. Don't ever think that you are less than the next man. Your pride is damaged, oh God. Don't stress, man, you the best man. Our people changing, that's all. Right, my baby, don't fight the days when your life is crazy, my God. Come right the days when you're wrong and lazy. Don't ever think that you are less than the next man. Your pride is damaged, oh God. Don't stress, man, you the best hand. Changing, that's all. Right, my baby, don't fight the days when your life is crazy, my God. Come right the days when you're wrong and lazy. Don't ever think that you are less than the next man. Your pride is damaged, your God. Okay, I need everybody to stress me. You the best man. Now people changing, that's all. Right, my baby, don't fight the days when your life is crazy, my God. Come right the days when you're wrong and lazy. Don't ever think that you are less than the next man. Your pride is damaged, your God.
Oh man, I'm Mike Mellon. That was cool. I think we got more for y'all. I'm about to drink some water. This next one is 27, and that one was Best Hand. Ivy voice is amazing, by the way. Okay, let's get into it. Okay. Yeah. Oh yeah, that's good. You can take the delay off. Yo. Certified without a day, I'll be a legend. And to the mother of my seed, I swear she well protected. No weapon could contest the beast, I'm in a different Tesla. The bullets floating with the trees, I bet it can't express it. I'm slaving hard enough this week to serve a bold impression. Lil' Jody, get your bit aggression. Address me as a highness or a princess when I'm stretching. Learn your lesson, never been a hoe, I vote the bestest. Form Da Vinci codes, coded righteous imperfections. Life is Tetris, sexing my bitch from Texas next to a naked dick. Shawty, I was pressing out in LA. Fuck her like it's payday, but every day is payday. They say I'm in my own lane, but I invented roll ray.
I don't wanna waste your time. Oh, no.
What is life like? What it is? What it is? Look, hey, everything seems so bright. So, I'ma just turn these lights off. I don't wanna waste your time. What is life like inside you? Everything seems so bright. So, I'ma just turn these lights off. Look, yo, hey yo, this beat feel like the cookout. Serving till it's all gone. Bro, be the lookout. Swear this won't take long, dog. I need it like my heart stop. Gasping like it's part time. I know the word for my time is televised in prime time. The ego hunts through nighttime. The ego views a lifetime. Yo, penalties be bite size. I'm sick of being a nice guy. I'm sick of being stepped on. Sick of being slept on. I'm about to raise the price on them. It's venom in this python. The rhythm in your right eye. The vision in your third eye. Immortalize your lifeline. Call you for the white lies. They say you love me nice now. Back it up, I like that. Eat it like it's my last. The gift you cannot bite back. That was 27. I am Mike Mellon. Thank y'all. Appreciate y'all. That was dope. I like that a lot.
What is whole body vibration and how does it relate to sound studies in Egypt? So you did an interview with Emiliano, I think, and you were talking about sound studies that you did inside the pyramids and what you found in those studies. And I would love for you to speak more on that.
Okay, well, going back first of all, to the music blood experiments that I just described, the next stage of those experiments is also very exciting and related to your question here, because about the same time that we were conducting our experiments in the UK, in Augusta University in the USA, they were conducting experiments with whole body vibration of not humans, but mice. And they found some really interesting results related to whole body vibration. So what whole body vibration is literally putting someone onto a vibration table, you could call it, or a platform that's vibrating at low frequencies. Well, we've already discussed, what happens when when low frequencies come into your body. This additional oxygen is being made available. So what I'm thinking is almost certainly with the Augusta study with mice, they found an increase in leukocytes. These are the scavenger cells in your blood, that mop up any kind of pathogen that's coming into your environment. And so it's very important that we have the right numbers of leukocytes in our blood. And they found that this low body vibration actually accelerated the proliferation of leukocytes in the mice. So we now want to do the same thing with human blood and with music, basically, to see if there's this connection between music and leukocyte proliferation. But anyway, coming now back to your question about Egypt, where this comes in, because when how my whole field of research began really goes way back to 1996 and 97, and in that time I conducted some experiments in the Great Pyramid, acoustics experiments. So in 96, I first went there with my daddy, and I did something quite naughty, which is to lie in the sarcophagus, which is that, in the King's Chamber of the Great Pyramid, there's this 3.7
No, you didn't. Oh.
This 3.7 ton granite box, and a lot of people have laid in it. Even Napoleon Bonaparte, lay in it. Of course, it's discouraged by the authorities. Yeah. But anyway, I did it,
and I
made a vocal glissando. Because, as an acoustics engineer at that time, I was very interested in the unique acoustics of that chamber and the sarcophagus. Anyway, I did this naughty thing, and the result of it was that at one particular frequency, every cell in my body tingled. I mean, it was an amazing feeling. And also goosebumps broke out all over my flesh. It was really quite something. And I knew there and then that something magical was at work. There was some kind of a mechanism here that I wanted to investigate with, proper instrumentation. So I gained permission. I went back again in this same year, 96, armed with all of this acoustics instrumentation. But it wasn't those experiments. They were very successful experiments. But I went back again in 97 to conduct some more experiments that I hadn't had time to conduct in 96. And it was those 97 experiments that really did change my life forever and put me on the path that I'm on now, right? So what this was about, basically trying to visualize the resonances in that sarcophagus. So, you can measure them with acoustics instrumentation, but they are like pretty dry graphs that you're looking at. Yes, you can glean information from the data, but it's not particularly inspiring. So I designed this experiment where I stretched a membrane across the top of this sarcophagus, like a PVC membrane, basically, And instead of lying in the sarcophagus as I had in 96, I put a small speaker in the bottom of the sarcophagus, effectively to be, take my place, providing sound, of course, and very pure sound. So now I was feeding the speaker with an electronic oscillator instead of making sound vocally. And then sprinkle sand on the membrane, on the surface of the membrane. What I expected to see, Lauren, was probably, I thought anyway, I was going to see some geometric forms in the sand that I would then analyze, back in the lab and learn more about the resonances in that box. But what actually happened was so extraordinary, which was that instead of geometric patterns, I began to see a whole series of ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs appeared in the sand, right? Which was like, what, how on earth, So anyway, the antiquity inspector who was with me got very excited. It was so cool.
What did it say? What did it say?
Well, these are individual symbols. There was Ra, which is the symbol for the god Ra, which is a circle inside a circle. That's a hieroglyph for Ra. There was the Sa loop, which is the symbol for protection. There was the Jed pillar, which is the backbone of the god Osiris. A whole series of these different individual icons, hieroglyphic icons or symbols, we can call them. Anyway, it was very exciting.
Wow.
And I have, obviously
I'll have to
developed.
put some pictures up, for the
well, you can do that for sure.
Your
of course, you're very welcome, because I
Soundmakers
think if I hadn't taken pictures, Lauren, nobody would have believed me.
Wow, that's so crazy. No, when I saw it,
know.
I literally freaked out. Like that's what brought me on to your research and made me want to continue digging into cymetics, and even people who have inspired you and their studies in sound, like Hans Sieni, yeah, that's how you say his name. Yeah, and yeah, I really appreciate the research that you have done. It is amazing.
But the other aspect to this Egyptian research, which I have not yet recounted and was equally amazing, was that 3 weeks before going out to Egypt in 1997, I injured my lower back quite badly. I mean, I was in a lot of pain. I was in so much pain, actually, that I really thought I would have to cancel the whole mission. But in the end, I just took a lot of painkillers and gritted my teeth, and I managed to get into the pyramid to set up this 97 experiment with the sarcophagus. But I was still in a lot of pain and, sweat pouring out of me and, just really struggling. Anyway, then I started to see these ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, right, coming out on the membrane. And then the antiquities inspector got very excited, as I did, of course. And then about 20 minutes into this experiment, I suddenly noticed, as I was bending down, to look across the surface of the membrane, I suddenly noticed that there was no pain in my lower back. All the pain had left me. Well, in that moment, Lauren, I thought, I know what's going on here. This is endorphins. I'm very excited. I'm very happy at seeing these amazing images coming out on the membrane. And I thought this was just endorphins that are effectively acting to mask the pain. When your body is flooded with happiness, with joy, basically, all sorts of hormones are produced. One of them, for example, is dopamine, which puts you into a joyful state. It also, cortisol is suppressed when you're in joy. And so,
I think
this is what music does for a lot of people. It boosts your dopamine levels. It suppresses your cortisol levels. And when your dopamine levels are increased, by the way, one of the other effects is that your leukocytes are proliferated. So in other words, you've got better immune system working for you. And this is all as a result of music. But coming back to the pyramid anyway, I believed in that moment, that the pain was being masked because of my excitement, my joy, basically. And I thought, when I get outside the pyramid and get back to the hotel, this is going to wear off, and the pain's going to come back with a vengeance. But the truth is, the pain never did come back. And so I realized that something very important had happened. It wasn't just seeing the hieroglyphs that was so, important, which that was important because that went on, that inspired me to develop the cymoscope instrument, which, by the way, you can see behind me here. This is the cymoscope instrument here, which makes sound visible, right? So this came about because of that experiment. But then the other thing that happened, of course, was that
Thanks so much for that recording, by the way, of the singing bowl.
Oh, it's a pleasure. The other thing, of course, was that, thank you, I was inspired, to find out, because I have a curious mind, and I wanted to know how was my lower back healed within about 20 minutes of making sound, you see. So ever since that day, 1997, so over 20 years ago, I've been focused on developing the cymoscope instrument, for one, and then the other thing, of course, is investigating how does sound heal? What is the biological mechanism that underpins sound's ability to heal us? And it is a fascinating journey that I've been on, and I'm still on, of course.
Wow. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate that. Wow. Pleasure. Okay. A question. How does sound as an organizing principle influence the creation of the universe? Question mark. Duh.
That's a great question. That's a really great question. Well, we're talking here about the science of cymatics, which is the science of sound made visible. And what that really means is that whenever you have a sound, and you have a membrane is present with that sound, then the sound must imprint a pattern onto that membrane. It's just the laws of physics, basically. It will always do that. And of course, you can't see those patterns. They're invisible to the unaided eye, but they're there nevertheless. And so, like, I'm making sound now, there will be patterns forming on the surface of my skin, for example. But also, my body contains trillions of cells. Every cell has a membrane, literally a membrane around the cell. And the vocal, sounds that I'm making now are imprinting a cymatic pattern on every cell in my body. Wherever there's a membrane, basically, there will be patterns, emerging.
Yeah.
Now, this is obviously extremely important and a key aspect to how sound
That's very multidimensional.
It is. So you've got to
think about
like
sound
this,
as a
these beautiful patterns that we're talking about, these cymatic patterns, every sound around you, not only sounds that you are making vocally, but any sound at all. If you walk out into the city and there's a lot of traffic noise, heavy trucks, whatever, all of those sounds are literally imprinting patterns onto your cellular membranes. And we could talk a long time about what does that mean, for you as in terms of your health and so on. But coming back to your question here, so I had to provide a foundation which shows that sound has an organizing principle. Whenever you have sound and you have a membrane, it will organize the molecules into a pattern. That's a fundamental principle of physics. So now coming back to the beginning of time, the beginning of the universe, we are led to believe that the universe began as a big bang. Whether we believe that or not, it doesn't necessarily matter to what I'm going to explain now, because some people do believe that, some people don't. But there is a fact, which is that when you look at the heavens with a powerful telescope, what you will see is groups of galaxies in one area of the sky, and then a huge void of nothingness, and then huge group of galaxies in a different part of the sky, and then another big void, and then so on. So the whole sky is made up of groups of galaxies. Why should this be? Well, the cosmologists, that have puzzled this question, have come up with the idea that it's not due to gravitational effects. What they're saying is that, and we have to again come back to the idea that the Big Bang perhaps is a reality, that associated with the Big Bang was a big sound, right? And that the sound pressure that moved out through this expanding bubble of matter created areas of antinodal areas, which are high pressure areas, and then nodal areas, which are relatively low pressure areas within this expanding bubble of matter. And it's these different areas of pressure that literally caused more matter to be in some places than in other places. In other words, sound was in the first few 100,000 years of the universe, was the primordial organizing principle or organizing force. It's why we have these galaxies in different, not galaxies, groups of galaxies, in different areas of the heavens, right? That's according to the present day theory as to why that is. So sound was present right at the beginning of the universe. And it's interesting, isn't it, Lauren, because there are lots of religious traditions, spiritual traditions, different from different cultures around the world, that talk about sound as being the primordial force in the universe. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word, so the Word
in the middle of the universe.
The Word creates form. And here, how these ancient cultures could have known this, who knows where that information came from? Is it the Akashic field? I don't know. But certainly it's true that there are many cultures that talk about sound, including the ancient Egyptians, by the way. The god Ptah talked about sound, the voice of the god creating the universe, basically. So I don't know how they knew that information, but certainly modern day science is showing us the same idea, that sound was the primordial force. And then, coming to Earth, how did life begin in the primordial oceans? Well, again, this is another subject which, is a fascinating area for me, because sound healing, sound therapy is, I believe, ultimately connected with how life began in the primordial oceans. Because what I'm saying is that if sound was a prime mover in the creation of life, right? And that's my theory, and I've got a lot of information to back that up. If sound was the prime mover in the creation of life, then shouldn't sound be able to heal life? And of course it does, right? So it's a fascinating subject, Lauren.
I think there was something I read about, because you have a lot on marine studies, or how you have something on dolphins, you have like how water interacts with sound. And I guess what I'm trying to get at is, you mentioned thermal vents in the ocean and how sound would act in that situation as a bubble. And I thought that was so interesting. Could you speak more on that?
Yeah, sure. I was talking earlier there about how sound interacts with membranes in your body. So every cell has a membrane, and of course, therefore, whenever sound is present, there has to be a cymatic pattern form on that membrane. Laws of physics, right? Well, the same is true in the oceans. I don't think any biologist would disagree that life began around hydrothermal vents in the ocean. This is where there are hot gases, that are pouring up out of the core of the earth into the ocean. And of course, wherever you've got gases coming up into water, you will have bubbles forming. And these are little gas bubbles. Well, say little, they range in size. Some of them are the size of melons, huge things. But then you get a whole range of bubbles going way down to the microscopic range. And one of the amazing things about sound and bubbles is that there's a physics principle that says that when you have an area that's enclosed in gas, in this case a bubble that's enclosed in this case a watery environment, that will be a resonant frequency for that particular volume of gas that's been enclosed, okay? And this again, just the basic laws of physics. And this is called Helmholtz Resonance. And what it means basically is that every size of bubble that's coming up out of the vents, these hydrothermal vents, has its own unique resonant frequency. Obviously, the larger bubbles will resonate at much lower frequencies, and the smaller bubbles, going down to the microscopic scale, will resonate at much higher frequencies, okay? But remember that whenever you have a membrane and you have a sound, you have to have a cymatic pattern, okay? So it means that every bubble that has a pattern around it, every bubble in the ocean that's coming out of these vents, has to have a cymatic pattern around it. Whether you can see it or not is irrelevant. With the special lighting, you can see them. So why is this important in relation to how life began in the primordial oceans? Well, sometimes, in my lectures, I give an analogy of a mechanical watch. I've actually got one on my wrist here, a mechanical watch. It has a few hundred parts, okay? So let's take...
Uh-oh.
Okay, and we put them in a flask, and we shake the flask, right? And then we ask the question, how long will it take all of these parts to come together and make a working watch? Right?
Never.
And of course, the answer is never. It will never happen because there are too many combinations, and you've got a few hundred parts and they're all jiggling about, they will basically wear each other out before, a watch becomes, a working watch becomes out of this chaos. Anyway, it's just an analogy. It's basically saying that the biological components that are already in the ocean, and by the way, this is interesting that there's been a lot of research being conducted recently with comets. For many years, cosmologists have believed that the waters of the Earth were seeded from comets with biological materials. This was being, it's been theorized for a long, long time, at least 100 years. Now, in recent times, NASA and the European Space Agency and Japan have sent probes up to comets and sampled the dust on comets and found, lo and behold, yes, there are biological materials on the comets, okay? This is not life, but these are the compounds that would make life, ultimately. So, okay, so now it's been kind of proven that the oceans were seeded from comets, okay, that were coming into the oceans from space with the building blocks of life. But coming back to the watch analysis, doesn't matter how many building blocks you have and how much time you have, they will never come together as life unless you have an organizing principle.
Yeah.
And what I'm saying is that organizing principle is sound, because when you have a bubble, you have to have a cymatic pattern. Well, a cymatic pattern consists of areas of low pressure and areas of high pressure. So the antinodal areas are the high pressure.
We're gonna get some visuals. We're gonna get a ton of visuals.
Yeah, of course. And the nodal pressures are the areas where there's almost no vibration. Well, where are these building blocks going to migrate to? Well, they're obviously going to migrate to the areas where there's no vibration, the nodal areas of the bubble. So this is a kind of safe haven, for the building blocks of life. And I believe this is how the very first cells were formed, through this cymatic principle, where it's an organizing principle. It would still take millions of years of trial and error, to bring the building blocks together in a coherent way, in a very specific way to create life, but at least there is an organizing principle. Without it, it's all just random, right? You know, and you would never get life in a random process.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much for that.
Pleasure.
Okay. I think I asked all of my questions. Thank you so much for your time, and I have enjoyed this interview.
Me too. Thank you.
Just thank you for your work. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you coming on here to talk to me about this, and I am excited to share this with you guys. Give it up.
It's been a great pleasure.
Yes.
You have a great day.
You too.
Ready. Thank you so much for tapping in, for tuning in. And if you're still listening, don't forget to click the links below to donate to the Loveland Foundation and the Green Line Initiative. Next up, we have Azura Vibes and D Madness with singles off of their project, Dopium.
Thank you so much. Thank you 432 HD Fest for having us and 512 Studios Live. We appreciate you. This first song is entitled Headbanger. Then I gave it to him 2 times, make him spit rhymes. It's fine as wine and stay on ice like Creon. Make him be on that sin and that freak when skins. Watch me dance with the sin when I walk up in the room. Bam, such a damn shame. How did we end up this way when you don't remember my name? But we had banging, and all I'm saying is we could be friends. Yeah, we could do this every weekend when you touching my body. What you trying to see? I can give it to you, baby. Love it. Get to me, boy. What you waiting for? I can't get you off my cookie. Yes. Supercalifragilistic, sexy, Thank you so much. So we have one more for you guys. And the next one is entitled Rise. I think that it's a very uplifting song for this time. It's what a time to be alive, right? So much going on in the world. So hopefully this song gives you some encouragement, some upliftment. This is Rise. And thank you again to the Loveland Foundation. We are raising money for the Loveland Foundation, and Take Initiative, I think, is the other foundation for Black mental health resources. So you guys be sure to contribute. And thanks again for watching and for your support. Can you hear the prophecy? Got my eyes wide open and I realize my destiny. Keep your mind wide open and set your soul free. We're on the rise. We're on the rise. We will never die. We're on the rise. We're on the rise. We will never die. When you're looking at your life through the rim of a bottle, your secrets all exposed, then brush to shore for all to tell. But they don't know the truth. They never walked in your shoes. How could they know? How could they know? How could they know? It's already been written. I know the truth within me. Freedom is our ambition. Can you hear the prophecy? Got my eyes wide open and I realize my destiny. Keep your mind wide open and set your soul free. We're on the rise. We're on the rise. We will never die. We're on the rise. We're on the rise. We will never die. Teardrops flood my eyes. Teardrops fall in the wine. Teardrops cover me completely. It's already been written. I know the truth within me. Freedom is our ambition. Can you hear the prophecy? Yeah. Hey. Got my eyes wide open and I realize my destiny. Keep your mind wide open and set your soul free. We're on the rise. We're on the rise. We will never die. We're on the rise. We're on the rise. We will never die. We're on the rise. We're on the rise. We will never die. We're on the rise. We're on the rise. We have Lorenzo Dwayne Jackson on the keys and drums. It's already been written. I know the truth within me. Yeah. Freedom is our ambition. Can you hear the prophecy? Got my eyes wide open and I realize my destiny. Keep your mind wide open and set your soul free. We're on the rise. We're on the rise. We will never die. We're on the rise. We're on the rise. We will never die. We're on the rise. Thank y'all so much. I'm at Zero Vibes. You just heard me with Lorenzo Dwayne Jackson, and that's our new project coming soon, entitled Dopium. Thank you so much.
Give it up for Azura Vibes if you're at home. Clap by yourself. Thank you guys for tuning in so much. This is 432 Hertz live stream coming to you from 512 Studios. Shout out to our people who made this possible, Charlotte Street Foundation, Andy Warhol Foundation. And thank you so much for your continuous support for this project. Peace out. Enjoy this outro.